So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this event, Honoring Life, Dealing with Loss, Trauma, and Grief. This event is a joint collaboration of the Janki Foundation for Spirituality and Healthcare and the Brahma Kumaris. I am Nirmala, your host this afternoon. I volunteer with both charities and I currently work in the Mental Health Trust in Wakefield. So this topic is a very important topic for me, especially. A little bit about the two charities. The Janki Foundation for Spirituality and Healthcare is a UK-based charity which encourages research and awareness in the field of spirituality and health. The Brahma Kumaris is a worldwide spiritual movement dedicated to personal transformation and world renewal. This event is a follow-on from a previous event on honoring life, facing the effects of the loss of loved ones. This was hosted by the Brahma Kumaris, and it was a conversation between Sister Jayanti, who is the European director of the Brahma Kumaris, and Deacon John Sutton, Loughborough University chaplain and Methodist minister. If you would like to view this past event, it can be viewed from the Janki Foundation website. So in the last 18 months, we've all experienced some form of loss, trauma, and grief. During this pandemic, we've all had to face new things every day, perhaps. So some of us must have experienced loss through loss of health with the COVID-19 pandemic, losing a job, loss of financial stability, perhaps breakdown of relationships, a miscarriage, retirement, death of a pet, loss of dreams that you wanted to do for 2020, 2021, or someone, a loved one being seriously ill. Or it could be loss of friendship, not having to be able to visit people, or it could be loss of safety after you've gone through a trauma. So a sudden illness, for example, an accident or an assault or a natural disaster, all these can be classed as traumatic experiences which upset and distress us. There arose powerful feelings within us. So whatever type of loss or trauma you have suffered, there's no right and wrong way to grieve. There's only the way you know. And we will be exploring that this afternoon. So grief is a natural response to loss. It's an emotional suffering we feel when something or someone we love or we cherish has been taken away. And often the pain of loss can feel very overwhelming. So as life continues and we learn to cope with these losses, deal with our traumas and go through our grieving processes, it is important to continue to honor life. And this series is all about that, honoring life. So I'm grateful to our panelists for taking the time to be with us this afternoon in sharing their experiences and wisdom in dealing effectively with loss, trauma, and grief. So our first panelist is Nina Buchanan. And Nina is a funeral celebrant and self-empowerment coach from London. Welcome, Nina. Then we have Jan Hine, and Jan is a registered nurse and is an interfaith minister from Sheffield. So welcome, Jan. And we have Rita Patel from Leicester, and Rita is currently the Assistant City Mayor for Communities, Equalities and Special Projects. So Rita, welcome. So before our panelists share their thoughts with us, I'd like to invite you to join us in a minute of silence, to be present and to acknowledge coming to terms with our losses, the traumas we've had to deal with, and the griefs we've had to go through. Okay, thank you very much. So our first panelist is Nina. So Nina is a multi-skilled, independent funeral celebrant and self-empowerment coach. She has a career in the voluntary sector and in education. Her experiences are enhanced through her personal journey, and she also serves in end-of-life care, in bereavement counseling, and she's an experienced meditation practitioner. So Nina will be sharing on dealing with grief and stages of grief. So thank you, Nina, and over to you.
So thank you, Nirmala, and a very warm welcome to all the participants who are listening to us this evening. So I'm going to be focusing specifically on grief. So I want to start off by saying that loss, trauma, grieving, and wisdom are words, or should I say experiences that are inextricably linked to our journey as human beings. We've all experienced loss, a traumatic occurrence that triggers the grieving process, as Nirmala just mentioned. However, the journey of our grieving can lead to acceptance and a place of wisdom. As Gabor Mate said, there's wisdom in trauma. So as human beings, we see death, the passing of life, as the ultimate loss, and we tend to spend our time associating loss and grieving mainly to this area of life. Yet if we were to spend more time exploring loss and grieving in other areas in our lives, perhaps this would help us to be more balanced, less traumatized around the subject of death. So what I want to do is to explore grieving triggered by events and circumstances where loss of some kind or other is experienced in our lives. And as you know, they are numerous and broadly speaking show up under the umbrella of health, physically or mentally major life-changing and degenerative conditions. The other area is finance. And a good example to highlight is bankruptcy or job loss that invariably impacts the lives of immediate and extended family members. And the third area that I want to just focus on is breakdowns in relationships leading to, say, divorce and separation between families and loved ones. And as Nirmala mentioned, the whole world is just coming out of a period of lockdown during which we grieve the loss of the privilege, among other things, of going outside. And all of these events are symbolic of a death, of a way of life that we enjoyed, and are now faced with the discomfort of finding an alternative way of existing for some time, depending on how we manage the grieving process of loss and being in an unfamiliar place, because that's where the grieving process takes us. And we get to be that, it's like being that adult having to return to being the toddler, learning to walk again without any hope of restoring their previous state of health, material wealth, or relationship with a loved one. So the 5 stages of grief: anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, are there to reassure us that it is natural to grieve loss, and it provides us with the opportunity of knowing where we are in the grieving process and for how long we've been stuck in any of the 4 stages: anger, denial, bargaining, or depression. I just want to touch on shame. Shame is an expression of passive anger. So it's at that first stage where anger is being expressed, and it could be overt, or it could be it could be silent. So anger is an expression of passive anger and is an indication that there isn't full acceptance of the losses we experience in life, and the absence of acceptance in these different stages of our lives. Say, for example, from childhood to adulthood means that there is a buildup of grief in some way, shape, or form that has become part of our personality. For instance, a parent that avoids talking about a child from whom they have been separated for many years. Another example is carrying feelings of regret about the loss over a long period of time means that I'm oscillating between the passive anger and the bargaining stages. So how can we begin to see loss, or should we say change, as a necessary constant in our lives that enables us to honor life and achieve greater wisdom at the same time? There is wisdom to be gained from being present to loss, as there's wisdom in trauma, suffering, reaching the stage of complete acceptance. So to become more present to the 5 stages of grieving provides us with a map and a compass of self-awareness to enable us to successfully navigate the terrain of the birth of something new, like a new relationship, a new job, renewed health and well-being, to the death or change of that experience. So how can we become more self-aware? So there's a saying where whatever we resist persists. Self-awareness is knowing and embracing my true identity as a non-physical being, being so comfortable with who I am that I can accept those uncomfortable stages of grief, accepting the anger, accepting denial, accepting bargaining, and the depression stage, which in many cases change victims into survivors who have forgiven abusers responsible for causing major long-term harm to their lives. So, for example, a mother who forgives the murderer of her son, the father of a murdered pizza delivery driver who forgives the killer, hugs him, and brings the courtroom to tears. An actor who began to develop Parkinson's, symptoms of Parkinson's disease before he was 30 years old, The symptoms worsened and rapidly ended his flourishing acting career. However, despite this, after the initial shock and despondency, he looked back on the development of this condition. And a few years later, in his autobiography, he wrote that what he had learned about life and himself through Parkinson's had outweighed the detriment of having it. When all was said and done, he still considered himself to be a lucky man. Another example is the jilted lover who was intensely traumatized by the experience, after having a time of reflection, can see how that experience gave them the opportunity to reinvent their life for the better. Whatever trauma I experienced on my own journey that has caused separation has been pivotal to my own transformation, in that healing can only take place when I choose to look loss and grief in the face. Yes, in this, we are being challenged to grow, but it's a challenge that we cannot afford to avoid. Otherwise, we are trapped in the bog of stagnation when we face the challenge in staying awake to accepting loss and change, in staying awake and learning from that experience. We're honoring life, we're honoring the wisdom that it brings. We are preparing ourselves to embrace the final change, the final separation, in the spirit of acceptance and celebration, the separation of the soul from the body, the costume that we occupy. So thank you very much for listening. I hope I haven't gone over my time.
No, that's fine, Nina. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite our second panelist. So Jan Hine. So Jan is a registered nurse and is an interfaith minister and spiritual counselor, as well as a supervising counseling and psychotherapy. So Jan has a long experience of working within the NHS in different settings, supporting people in making sense of their experiences and in the expression of their faith and belief. She currently works with the Hospital Chaplaincy and Oral History Department in palliative care in her local teaching hospital in Sheffield. And Jan is also a Reiki master and teacher. So welcome, Jan. And Jan will be sharing on dealing with trauma. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon. I would like to begin by sharing with you my total commitment to developing and deepening my daily spiritual practices, and also my exploration of interfaith. They have become habits which have, as the great Sufi mystic and poet Hafiz wrote, the potential to reap gold or mint gold. This habit, a synthesis of faith and practice, has had a deeply positive influence in all aspects of my life and the work I do, but also at the present time is a source of both strength and power as my family and I face and come to terms with the trauma, which I will talk about later. Trauma, whatever form it may take, is usually an event, an experience that takes us out of ourselves. There are few professionals who do not come into contact with people in crisis, trauma. And all of us have come into contact with the trauma of coronavirus. Trauma has a quality of sudden, massive, and overwhelming threat to the individual's safety, as well as too much happening too quickly for the brain to be able to deal with. really information overload. We can feel disconnected from our core, our center, completely knocked off balance, discombobulated. I like that word because it illuminates the havoc, the damage, the trauma that trauma can cause to both all of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Trauma brings with it an overwhelming sense of terror, fear, panic, confusion. Our bodies and nervous system totally shot through. When I was 8 years old, I told my parents that I was going to be a nun when I grew up. My dad said, "You don't want to do that. You won't ever be able to eat pineapple evaporated milk again." So I said, "Okay, I'll be a nurse." And I did. My career in nursing was both demanding and richly rewarding, and I loved it. My work, by its very nature, meant I was often intimately involved with people and significant others coming to terms with and living with life-threatening illness, listening as they shared their stories of trauma, shock, sadness, and despair, as they grapple with life-changing situations. I definitely became more interested in a holistic approach to healthcare, equality of mind, body, and spirit, especially spirit. It became less and less about my definite ego attachment to fixing, rescuing. I was also priding myself in being a font of all knowledge, and more about my quality of presence. And so, in 2002, I hung up my thermometer and began my training as an interfaith minister and spiritual counselor, honouring my quest to keep growing and learning spiritually, but as importantly, a very strong commitment to keep treading my own unique spiritual path with all its challenges and gifts. I've always been grateful for my career in nursing and the opportunities it has given me. After ordination, I knew as part of my ministry as a non-conformist minister, I wanted to give something back to the National Health Service. I applied to my local teaching hospital trust to volunteer in the chaplaincy department, offering both pastoral and spiritual care to both patients and staff, regardless of faith or belief. I have been a volunteer for 12 years now, and it is a total joy to serve in this way. I wanted everything I do to be grounded in the integrity of an authentic and evolving spiritual life. My own spiritual journey has been both enriched and enhanced by the mystical teachings to be found in all the faith traditions, the deeply devotional and intimate heartfelt practices combined with the wholly practical nature of the teachings suited my personality completely. I guess in the yogic system, I'm definitely both bhakti and karma. I love God and I want to share that love in service. Not the father figure sat on a fluffy cloud with a long white beard. No, I wanted to know God, the energy field of unconditional love and acceptance, an ocean of boundless love and light. I wanted an awareness of not only my own divinity, but everyone's divine nature. I'm also passionately interested in learning how to apply universal principles of acceptance, wisdom, forgiveness, compassion, and loving kindness. But I do add it is a work in progress. But I do know when I am in the presence of love and unconditional acceptance, I am in the heart, which has a quality of tenderness about it, as soft as wool. In that place, there is no lack, there is no limit, and there are no boundaries. When I am in that space, there is both respect for myself and others, which maintains a quality of peace and purity. Respect and faith nourish each other. Wisdom and compassion can then flourish, motivating me to be present, to be a presence of love to all I serve, especially when facing trauma. The purpose of any spiritual practice, of which you know there are many, is to realign our minds and our consciousness with what is highest, deepest, and truest in ourselves. It is the opening of our minds and hearts, a whole being to God, to love. Meditation, yoga, is my main practice. Each morning, before I do anything else, I spend time with the boss, in silence, still, receptive, opening my heart to receive guidance and grace. It is a wonderful way to start the day, calming and stilling my mind, and I can also reconnect throughout the day whenever I want in silence. The benefit and power of this practice for me has been enormous and has deepened over the years with practice. It's true to say it actually does mint gold, and no more than at this present time when my family and I am traumatized by the shocking news that one of our grandchildren, Lila, who is 11 and lives with our son and his family in France, has been diagnosed with a highly malignant cancer of her kidney, requiring urgent radical surgery. The news came suddenly in May this year, totally out of the blue. Our Lila is a bouncing, fun-loving little girl who used to complain of the odd vague abdominal pain. Who could possibly believe this was happening? How could it be possible? By the end of May, Lila had undergone surgery to remove her kidney and spent the next 2 months in and out of intensive care due to her remaining kidney not working properly. Slowly, her renal function is improving, and she has now been home for just over a month. It has and continues to be profoundly traumatic for the whole of our family. My relationship with God, the source of all, is the most important relationship in my life, and the quality of that relationship influences every other relationship in a positive and life-honoring way. Maintaining my daily practice and connecting to God at this tender and difficult time has been a precious gift for me, and I can share that gift with the transmission of spiritual love every day with my family, with total trust in the process that in the end, all will be well and all manner of things will be well. We will all need wise, strong, compassionate and loving hearts to face and cope with trauma, so it can be more benefit to the world, whatever our belief or faith may be. I would like to end by sharing a Buddhist practice of loving kindness called metta, as my heart expands in love, not just for my own family, but for you all gathered here today and all beings who may be experiencing grief, trauma and loss. May all beings dwell in the heart. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be healed. May all know their wholeness. And may all be happy and at peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, for sharing from your personal experience. And I'd just like to perhaps just have a pause and for us to send our good wishes through our thought of peace and calm to Lila and your family in France and the rest of your household. So let's just take a moment to pause. Okay, thank you. So I'd like to thank Jan for sharing and now introduce our final panelist, Rita. So welcome, Rita. And just a little bit about Rita. Rita was first elected as Leicester City Councillor in 2011. And she's currently, as I mentioned, the Assistant City Mayor for Communities, Equalities and Special Projects. Rita Patel is best known for championing community, women's and race issues locally and nationally. As one of the founders of the Belgrave Bahino Women's Center and the People Center, she has been a strong advocate for local people, particularly in Belgrave and Rushden, which is in Leicester, for over 40 years now. Rita has also co-founded many national organizations to work on equality and human rights issues. So Rita, welcome and thank you for taking the time to be with us. And Rita is going to be sharing on dealing with loss. So over to you, Rita.
Thank you, Nirmala. I just want to say thank you for inviting me today to share my personal journey of loss and what I've learned on that journey. And also, I would just want to thank everybody who's joined us today. I know often it can't be easy to take time out, but I think it's a really important subject, as in life, you know, dealing with loss and a sense of grief at such a poignant time when a lot of people, a lot of families are grieving and suffering loss. I think it's really an important subject to speak about. So I'm not here today so much as an assistant mayor, but certainly as an individual who has learned through spirituality and through life experiences about loss. And I share my experience in the hope that it will actually help and support someone somewhere in dealing with the challenges that they face. My mother passed away about 6 weeks ago, and it was after an illness. She was in hospital and she definitely felt that her time was coming and that she wanted to come out of hospital. She wanted to be at home when she passed away. She wanted to be in her own bed, and she had great faith that her prayers were being listened to, and that there would be no drama, but there would be an effortless passing. And she wanted to be with the family. And so we honored that. My experience of my father's passing, which was sudden, 40 years previously when I was in my early 20s, was very different. My father passed away suddenly. I was very young. And I remember going through some of the processes that Nina has described today of trying to bargain with God, that if only he would enable my father to live. And even after he died, for me to see him, then, I would strike a bargain. I would do this, that, the other. I have to say, 40 years on, having gone through similar experience and having lost my mum, it has been a very, very different journey for me. And that's why I'm able to speak here today. My mother-in-law, who passed away about 30 years ago, was my first experience of a woman of great faith taking charge of how she was going to pass, but also taking charge of her family and making sure that she shared the wisdom that she had gained in her life with us all, and that she was very clear about what she wanted, even in terms of her funeral and how she wanted and where she wanted to be when she passed. My mother used to tell me that she learned a lot from my mother-in-law's last few weeks, and talking to her, she too had realized that it was important, if you knew that the end was near, to be very clear about what was important. My mother's faith, Mum had been meditating for about 40, 45 years. She was in the BKs, and her faith was so strong. And I remember actually at my mother-in-law's funeral, Swami Bhavyananda came from the Vedanta Center. And the one thing he said that I still remember is he said, the whole of life is about that one moment, a preparation for that one moment when the soul is departs from the body. How you're able to do that and with what kind of consciousness is dependent upon the practice of your whole life and your faith. And I certainly saw that in my mother and my mother-in-law's final few weeks. My mother, like my mother-in-law, was very strong in her faith, a very strong woman, but also both women were very wise and very spiritual, not in a dogmatic kind of way, but in a very practical kind of way. My mother spent time talking to us all in the family. Once she was home, and she was home with us for 3.5 weeks whilst we took care of her, we all took time out from work, completely stopped work, and we spent 3.5 weeks making happy memories, talking to her and understanding as she shared the lessons that she had learnt in her life. And one of the greatest things was about the fact that we learned how to live. We teach children how to deal with issues that come up in their lives. We never teach people how to die. We never teach people how to prepare for that final transition. And it's really important. And I have to say that the process was unlike any other for us, because it was an empowering process for us and for her. She was very clear about what she wanted, very clear about how she wanted non-dramatic. She didn't want drama around her passing. She said, you know, she had already spoken to God, and that she would go in her sleep and she would go peacefully. There was to be no drama, that her funeral needed to be very simple, and speaking of spirituality and the things that she had learnt. And one of the things she always said to us was, remember, in life, it's our expectations that make us unhappy, not other people. Other people are just living their lives being themselves. It's our judgments that we make of what's wrong and right. It's the judgment that we make about how they should be behaving. And when they don't meet our expectations, we then experience unhappiness. So to be free and to live our life joyfully, but also to allow others to be free. I think in preparing us, what my mother did was give us the gift of and the permission to be joyful and happy in celebrating her life, in remembering the good times. That is not to say, and I would be lying if I said to you, there weren't times when we had a bit of a cry. There weren't times, you know, when we felt a bit down and we missed her. But they're soon replaced by memories of happiness and some of the things that she shared with us about her own childhood and her upbringing and what was really important to us. She was true to her faith, true to Hinduism, but also true to beliefs of the Brahma Kumaris, in the sense that the soul is an entity that is eternal, that it continues to live and it continues to flourish well after the body has gone. And in fact, one of the things that Mum took great pains to explain to us is that my body is no longer able to function in the way that it needs to function. My soul, my spirit now needs to be free so that it can sing and dance and it can be joyful. And therefore, this is not an ending. This is the release and an opportunity for a new beginning. So one of the things that she asked us, and she felt was the greatest gift that we could give her, was that of thinking of her with love and happiness and wishing her soul peace on its onward journey. And in fact, that's what we've tried to honor, that we truly believe that even as she passed, and even as the body lay there, that my mother's spirit was with us, joyful and free at long last from the pain and the struggle that she had. I think this journey has been as much about learning about death as been about life. That teaching people and sharing experiences, teaching people what a good death looks like, how to support someone through that process, and to prepare in a purposeful way. So, for example, my mother, like my grandmother, always had a pair of brand new clothes ready, and she would tell us on a regular basis, she would change those, and she would tell us where she kept them. So particularly in places like India, my grandmother used to say to my mom, you know, it's very difficult to get any new clothes at the last minute, particularly when the body is taken away for the funeral straight away on the day. And so she used to be ready for it. And my mother used to be ready likewise. And therefore, talking about death and a sense of loss and what we needed to do practically was not a problem. And in fact, that's one of the things that has helped us greatly. So what would I want to say to you all? That I think age and experience and faith do matter when you're dealing with a sense of loss. When I was a teenager, I used to be about at the age of 13, I used to be constantly afraid. At night, I used to knock on my parents' bedroom door and say I was really scared that one of them was going to pass away, and what would I do if that happened? But as life went on, you know, I learned that time takes care of everything, that all is truly well. And my mother, in her final days, taught us that it was important to be joyful and happy, even in facing a transition of a loved one and beyond that. So my greatest gift that I can impart to anybody is to accompany them on that journey of letting go and being free and being joyful and knowing that time will take care of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And that's so lovely for you to share from your personal experience and that journey of how you have also become stronger, and the support that your mom has sort of, you know, instilled in you to cope. So let's just take a moment to send good wishes to your mom and to you and your family. So just a moment of silence. Thank you all. So I'd like to now invite those of you who have any questions, any comments to the panelists, to post them in the chat box. And if you could post them to Janki Foundation. While this is happening, we're going to have someone share a song with us, and I'll introduce him in a moment. So as the chats are coming in, we would be able to open up the question and answer after the song. So I'd like to introduce Lucky C from Leicester, who will be sharing a song with us. And Lucky is a UK hip hop writer, a rapper, and performer. His music ranges from hip hop, R&B, and a hint of Bhangra. He has been writing since his late teens, performing in various locations and events across the UK and India. He has done a lot of awareness tracks, including themes of anti-bullying, mental health, autism, domestic violence, and knife crime, and also loss of life and dealing with grief. Lucky could not be with us this afternoon, so he has sent us his video of Hello and his song, which will follow. So I hope you enjoy that.
Hi, I'm Lucky. I'm a singer-songwriter from Loughborough, and I'm just going to explain to you the song Reasons, which is basically a conversation between a man speaking to God, and it's a man who's lost his cousin brother. So in the first verse, the man is explaining how his cousin brother died from an accident and just the shock and pain that he feels. And he starts asking questions to God like, why did this happen? My cousin brother had so much potential. One car crash has happened and everything's finished. He starts having regrets. If he was there that night, things could have been different, and he's trying to process and understand as to why this happened. And then he questions God, saying, you're meant to protect us, so why did you allow this to happen? And then God replies in the second verse, and God's comforting him, saying, I know you're in pain, I know it's sad to see, but you didn't know that your cousin had cancer, so him passing quick was actually a chance to leave. The spirituality being explained is that your cousin is a soul and he's just playing his part, and it's not the end, because they'll still be traveling on their journey. So don't start crying because you'll be pulling the soul back. He said give powerful, strong thoughts, and when the time is right, your souls will meet again. So even though it's a fictional story, it does have similarities with my life, because my cousin brother did commit suicide at 21. So I kind of loosely based it on that and what I would have said to God in that experience. But hopefully it gives people a better understanding on how to deal with death, bereavement, and giving a lot of love and good wishes to all the departed souls. Thank you.
Circles and cycles and seasons. For everything there's always reason, but it's never good. Never turns out as it should.
Yo, I gotta take a step back, I really can't believe this. This hit me hard, I'm falling down to pieces. My cousin brother had an accident, having seizures, and now pronounced dead. Where are you, Jesus? Why did this happen? He was so incredible. We were close in the brothers, the bond imperishable. Chasing his dreams, pursuing something medical. One car crash happened, had to end it all. I'm trying to get a grip, don't know what to make of it. Rewinding the scenes, thinking if I could have helped. If I was there that night, things could have gone well. Could have been someone else, now I can't face myself. I hate myself, and I'm a walking mess. Enduring stress, I'm talking less. Negative thoughts start to cut like swords. Trying to understand the source of this cause. Just answer one thing, why was he taken, God? All these feelings and questions I start shaking off. I really feel like a rocket that is taking off. My heart's breaking and I'm aching in a manic state of shock. But you meant to protect us, but you let this happen. Where's your peace and passion? Just imagine. Now I'm crying lows, don't know how I'm gonna cope. A nice quiet bloke, you left him dying slow.
Circles and cycles and seasons. For everything there's always reason, but it's never good. Never turns out as it should.
God replies back.
No one ever held you. No single moment of truth. But if you were mine, I would look into those eyes and said,
I know you're in pain, hurt emotionally. He was close to you, also close to me. But it's time to go, was destined totally. And now he's free of the pain, the soul can leave. I know it's sad to see, and you're probably mad at me. And him dying in the crash seems a tragedy. But he had cancer, would have died gradually. So him passing quick was a chance to leave. Don't blame your thoughts, don't torture yourself. Nothing could have been done, even with fortune and wealth. You're not gonna be punished, start scorching in hell. Pour waters of peace all over yourself. They're a soul, an actor, playing their part. The body is a costume right from the start. It's not the end, no, because the soul's just left. Traveling on its course, got a new address. The end becomes the start of a new beginning. So how should you be feeling as a human being? Don't start crying lost in your own tracks, cause it's very damaging to pull a soul back. Your powerful strong thoughts, so they return free. They can move with peace, carry on their journey. And just know one thing, this is never the end. And when the time's right, your souls will meet again.
Circles and cycles and seasons. For everything there's always reason. But it's never good. Never turns out as it should.
God replies back.
No one ever held you.
No one ever held you.
No single moment of truth.
No moment of
If
truth.
you were mine,
If you were mine,
I looked into those eyes
into those eyes.
and said,
Good wishes to souls going on their journey. Peace and love.
So appropriate. Thank you, Lucky, for that. And Lucky will be with us for our other series that we'll be doing in this topic of honoring life. So I'd like to invite all the panelists to be spotlighted so we can have a question and answer. So we have so far a few questions coming in. And I'm just going to, so the first one that came in was about, hold on. How could you, I think, John, this would be for you, but if any of the other panelists would like to add, or maybe Rita, how could you help people who do not believe in God go through grief? John, would you like to start with that?
I believe, yes. I think if people don't believe in God, that's fine. I've never, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever met an atheist in the whole of my life. But I have met people who fail to love. And so really, it would be more about finding out where they are, meeting them at their time in the journey, and what resonates with them in their heart. It doesn't have to be a God in the way that we understand it. And it could be, beginning of the work would be to heal relationships with God that were quite negative for them. A punishing God, an unloving God, thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that, God. Most people find something in the heart that is their spiritual core. I've got no doubt about that. So I would work with that to begin with.
Thanks, Jan. And following on from that, Rita, there's one that you can answer and sort of follow on from this question. Someone said that you give such a reassuring approach to death of a loved one. How can we help others to handle this in a similar way?
I think, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. I think it's important just to share experiences that we have. And one of the things that helped me a lot when I was younger, when my father passed away, was that I talked endlessly. I remember going for a car ride with a good friend of mine, and we drove 40 miles out from Leicester before we realized, because I was just wanting to talk about my father and all the good times and things that we had. And that friend really helped by just listening and being there and letting me know that no time was an inappropriate time to talk about the grief that I felt and the love that I felt for my father. And similarly, there have been friends around me this time who have just enveloped me in their love. And I think that's one of the things that we can do, whether we believe in God or not. We know what love feels like, and we can envelope the people that we see suffering in any shape or form, whether it's grief, loss, trauma of any kind, and we can envelope them in our love and just listen, really listen, and share what has been useful to us, because by sharing, we each one teaches one.
Yeah. And it's such a skill to be able to listen.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Nina, this one, I think it's about grief. So it says, we have heard about grief after change. But what about during the transitionary periods of change? Example, during an illness or during a pandemic. Any thoughts for me on that?
Well, it's very important, as I was saying in my talk, that it's important to be present to what one is feeling. And it's not easy if we've not practiced detachment or meditation in the past to be present to what we are feeling. But we can actually take it a step at a time by just really loving the self as much as possible. Really just being present to how I'm feeling and really loving myself, whatever it is that I'm feeling, whatever the reactions that might be, just accepting that and not making oneself any lesser than. It's a natural process that one has to experience. And it's a journey that takes one to a place of acceptance if I simply just accept whatever, the anger, the denial, the bargaining, the depression, even just accept, sit with it as much as possible. And of course, as the person who asked Rita the question, talk if you need to. And the people you're talking to, if they listen, it really is, you're holding that space around them to enable them to be who they want to be. It's like making the space expansive, if necessary, or making the space tight and comfy. It's about just holding that space. So yes, loving the self, no matter what.
Lovely, thank you for that, Nina. So this question, I'll pose it to the three of you, the panelists, and it says here, how can I prepare for death? And what can I do to make this a smooth transition? So maybe, have you thought of that? And if you have, what advice would you give to this person? Who wants to start us off?
Can I come in first?
Yes, go on,
Yeah,
Rita.
yeah. I think just from the experience of what the journey we went on with my mum, I think one of the things that I'm committed to is talking to my family about what I would want, not just in terms of funeral plans, but what I would want for them to do beyond my being here, the kind of things perhaps that we all wait for someone to die before we say how much we value particular things about them, etc. And I think if you take the time out and you start to have those discussions and what your aspirations are for how you would like to be cared for, where you would like to be. I used to be lead member for adult social care. And one of the things that one of the counselors once said to me was, you know, we never, you know, we have insurance, life insurance policy, but we never ask people, as you're less and less able in your life, how would you like to be cared for? Shall we do a plan for how you would like to be cared for, how you would like to move towards the you know, end of your life, and what you would like if you can't take care of yourself in the way in which you have? And I think there is a great unspoken issue about us not dealing with some of the issues because it's an unknown, and because we're afraid that by doing that we may get there. But you know, my brother is 2 years younger than me, and when my father was dying in the hospital, he said to me, and they were talking about what would happen as a result of his brain hemorrhage. And I was really upset about it. My brother said to me, in this hospital, Rita, they have fire extinguishers. They don't hope that there's going to be a fire, but they're prepared for it if there is a fire. And they know exactly what they would do because they have a fire drill. In the same way, the doctors and nurses are preparing us for the worst. If Dad dies, then so that we know what we need to do. They know what they need to do. And I think the journey of life is not just about when you're young, when you're having fun, when you're buying a house, when you're going on holidays. It's also about thinking about your old age. It's also about thinking about that transition. What would you like? How would you like to do it? How would you like other people to respond to that? What are the things that you want to say to them that you've not managed to say?
Thanks, Rita. Nina?
Yes, well, I'm just going to reinforce what Rita has said and what I've said, and of course, Jan also. So it's what I would like to leave with participants is the need to see loss or change as a natural part of life and acquiring the wisdom. When we need to become more present to the grieving process in ways which are not necessarily associated to death, but just naturally from on a day-to-day basis. What are the things that we lose? What are the things that we have to accept and let go of? And when we practice that, we will then be able to accept and celebrate the final change that we call death, which is really just saying what Rita has said in a different way. For me, that's really very important. So it becomes a natural part of life, dealing with change, dealing with loss, dealing with grief, etc. Thank you.
Jan, do you want to comment, or shall we go to the next question?
Only very briefly, but I was actually going to say many years ago, I did my course in care of the dying and supporting family after the death. And it was at St. Christopher's Hospice in London with Dame Cecilia Saunders when she was still alive. And it was such a sort of magical place to work, really, really positive. And out of that, we were told by Dame Cecilia, when you don't stay here, because this is like a little bit of heaven, but only for the few. You need to get back out there in the National Health Service because it's third world out there with how she was talking, how you look after people that are dying. And I must say, it's probably 20, 30 years since I did that course, but hearing and listening, still, when I go to visit people on the ward, they still don't know whether their mum and dad wanted a cremation or a burial. They don't know. It's painful, really, really. They don't know what they want. Often quite a lot of discord in the family. Some people half aren't talking to each other. It's kind of, there's so much work to do, isn't there, really? So I guess for me, I would say, get the paperwork done. Let people know that you want a burial or a cremation, where you want this. And I know because it never killed anybody, did it? Talking about death. It would be helpful, and who you want with you when you're dying, where you want to die. It's such an enormous area. A personal thing for me, I want it joyful because I think I'm a joyful soul. I'd want that to reflect me in music, poetry, dance, colour, and I'm going somewhere good. I'd want people to know that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jan. So another question is, despite having all the knowledge about the soul and its journey, is it still natural to grieve for your departed loved ones?
Definitely.
Jan, you want to start with that?
I think it's very natural.
Yes, it is. May I?
Oh, do, yes.
Yes. So yes, it is natural to grieve, but one grieves in a different way because it's all about awareness. Once one's awareness changes, then that changes the way in which I deal with circumstances conditions and things, and even people.
Yeah.
Yes. So the way I grieved many, many years ago when my parents left will be different to how I grieve now. There's a certain amount of wisdom and maturity to the situation. And, you know, yes, I may feel sad, as Rita has said, but in no way is the grieving, the level of grieving, the same as previously. The other thing that I wanted to say is that in order for us to really do those practical things in order to prepare for our passing or even the passing of a loved one, you know, the mind has to be prepared also. So there has to be an certain amount of awareness change in order to get that person, be the patient or the loved ones, to get into gear to make those practical changes. So the first step is starting with the self. Yes?
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a follow-up question to this one, and it says, it's just been posted. What can be done when someone got stuck in their grief and absolutely not wanting to accept their loss even after 10 plus years?
Well, actually, that's a very challenging one. And one can cater as much as possible by, as I said, holding that space around them. And, you know, but one needs to decide, that person who is really looking after that person, one needs to decide to what extent am I being compromised? And it's also about understanding that that soul is on their journey to you see.
Yeah.
And really at the end of the day, I cannot fix that person. I have to allow that person to experience in order to make that decision themselves.
Wouldn't to pose the question as if it's not someone dying, but grief of something else, because it's an open question.
Yeah.
So if someone is stuck in grief and it's not necessarily someone dying, but grief of something that is lost that we talked about, you know, what advice, Rita or Jan, would you have for that person?
I'd be very happy to talk, but Rita, I'm
Yes.
sure would like to say something.
You carry on. You carry on. Yes.
Oh, well, briefly. Somebody once said to me many years ago, it was delightful in the VKs, and she actually said, you know, it's your choice if you traumatize trauma, which I thought was quite an interesting notion. In my work with people with trauma and grief and loss, I think it's true to say, and I can be very brief, I've met two sorts really, quite distinct patterns, and not necessarily everybody's the same, but it tends to be people that are very intellectual about the whole thing, have Googled to death the whole situation, know absolutely everything, and it's all compartmentalized into very neat little boxes. Or there's another sort of person I work with that absolutely becomes totally embodied in it and totally stuck in it. And neither gets to the stage of letting go of the trauma, of the grief, letting go. And I think that's the way to help people. Some people feel really associate, it becomes them, you know, yeah. And I'll call it, or I am. And it becomes a bit of an embodiment. It's very much let it go. So I think a lot of my work when people are stuck, you get to know them, don't you? It's a personal journey. And it's how you work. And at heart level.
Thank you, Jan. I'm just aware the time is
just
kept up on us. So Rita, any last words? We don't have much time, but
I would just say, you know that time takes care of everything and that all is well. The soul knows exactly what its journey is and all is well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I just want to share, someone posts something in the chat and it says, life is light, dying is darkness, death is light again. So I want to thank all of our panelists. So Nina, Jan, Rita, thank you all for sharing from your personal experiences and your wisdom. And to our audience for taking the time to be with us this afternoon on Zoom and on our live stream on Facebook. We look forward to having you with us at our next Honoring Life event. And that will be on the 12th of December at 5 p.m. So we do have a slide that can go up with that information. And if you would like to be reminded of this event or to register, you don't need to register, but if you want to be reminded of the event, then you could go onto the Janki Foundation website and register for our events, and we will send you a reminder. I'd like to say special thank you from the heart to our planning and technical teams who have worked effortlessly behind the scenes for this to run smoothly. And we also thought we would share with you some sources of support that will also be on our website. So there are many organizations that are currently giving support, and these are just a few of them. And we thought, you know, if you need that particular support, you can go to their website. Some of them are charities, some of them the NHS, and different support. So please be aware of these areas of support. What I'd like for us to do now, as we come to near the end of this event, I'd like to invite you into a reflection. And the reflection is really on what you have learned and any tips you have taken from today's event, from what our panelists have shared. And in reflecting, complete the sentence that's on the slide in front of you. And in dealing with loss, trauma, or grief, I will. So just let's take a moment to reflect. Okay, so what I'd like to invite for those who are in Zoom with us, if you would like to complete your sentence and share it with us, if you feel comfortable doing that. And we will end with a reflective song, a meditation song, and it's a very lovely song. It's called The Prayer.